Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? Or should we call this the Zoom podcast, perhaps?
Well, it is. Well, hello, everyone. We're on Zoom because we're trendy, or we were trending. And as you can see, I'm in my home office now, which is where I spend most of my time. It's just like prison. Got a little workout room in the backyard, and then I have a shower.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see if anyone can crash the Zoom party anyway, from some of the things I've heard. But it's good to try out something new. I haven't actually used it before, but it looks like it's a really good tool. So, continuing coverage of the coronavirus then. So we've been living with a little bit of shutdown activity over the past week and a half to 2 weeks now. It's a little bit different in Adelaide compared to Melbourne, but essentially it's still the same sort of principles. Obviously, we have to all stay separate and keep distant, effectively stay at home the majority of the time. And to begin with, it would seem there was some early messaging coming out from the government saying that there's early encouraging signs of the curve flattening. So as a brief description, of course, that the flattening of the curve is what they're all aiming for to stop the spread, which is you don't get a skyrocketing amount of cases, which would then overload the medical and health system. There's a nice little chart of the past 2 weeks on the ABC site, and it appears, apart from a spike on the 28th of March, that seems like it's the case, which I guess is encouraging. But again, it's the how long do they have to continually monitor that and that sort of thing. And I think going over the next couple of weeks, and I guess months perhaps, it'll be interesting to see how they handle the messaging and telling us what's going on. Because if I can imagine if they say, oh yeah, it's going great, that that's when you get people starting to head out when they probably shouldn't, and it could potentially flare it all up again.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I'll be the first to declare it. I think it is going great. I think we've really, everyone is, certainly if you look at what they released on the ABC website, and they're talking about compliance. It looks like we're getting a 90% compliance in Australia, which is great. It'd be interesting to see if the numbers actually can grow or whether they can be maintained at this rate. And then maybe we might see if they are contained at this rate, after 2 or 3 weeks, might start to go down, which would then suggest maybe, just maybe, by the end of May, we'll start to see a consideration of the lifting of regulations. So that's not to give anyone false hope. I think you pretty much have to accept that for the next 6 weeks or 7 weeks at least, this is going to be the norm.
Well, that's the thing, consideration being the operative word there, because the other, I guess, part of the rhetoric that's been coming out is that you don't want to take your foot off the brake too early because you just don't know whether it's going to flare out or whatever. And they're still, I guess, worried about community transmission and how bad that potentially is, because it sounds like they're not 100% sure how that's going at the moment.
No, they're not. It's very interesting because I think there'll be a lot of, obviously, review of what's happened. But Australia's an interesting place. If you consider it state by state, each state is effectively an island. Maybe the East Coast is a little bit continuous, but if you consider it state by state, you've got, 5 million and 5 million in New South Wales and Victoria. And then in the other states, you've got a lot less. So in South Australia, you've only got 1 million. And you just wonder if, I know we've shut bars and clubs and that sort of thing, but there hasn't been a very high incidence of community transmission, person to person within communities. Most of corona has been imported, and that's principally where it's been spread from. So the question is there may in future be another way to handle these sorts of outbreaks, which would be seal the borders immediately, but keep everything going normally inside the state, because they're very good at monitoring when a case does present, who the contacts are and who's at risk. And I think that's why with the social compliance and the monitoring that health officials are doing, we've really been able to contain it. I actually personally think and would like to see some evidence or review of it, that it's that monitoring and the closing of the borders that has probably really stunted this, more so than actually the social distancing and the isolation, although that obviously helps.
Obviously, and the thing to point out there too is probably, I guess in hindsight, shutting it earlier than what we did would have been a lot more helpful, probably be even lower than what it is now.
Oh, exactly. And in which case then, and this is what I'm getting to, is perhaps you didn't need to close all the businesses that have been closed. You could have kept them open with restrictions, the social distancing, the number of patrons per 4 square metres. But maybe there's a lesson in here, and as I say, I'd be very interested to know. I'm sure they'll be able to model it on this data afterwards. The closing of the borders was the important thing. What we all need to remember is that for every country now outside of China where this started, the virus has been imported, and that can only happen by coming through borders. And, in Australia, it's been the cruise ships that have imported the virus, so to a large extent, and travel, So I just think that that's actually probably, becomes the priority in future for controlling the spread. Once it's in the local community, if somebody comes back with it or it's spread as we've seen, the health authorities locally, they've set up very well, and they've been able to identify the groups at risk, quarantine them or self-isolate them, and that's been very effective. I guess then coupled with self-isolation as well and everyone working from home, that's made it doubly hard to spread. But it's really about knowing who's got it. And that's why also we need to make sure that this situation of isolation and work from home probably has to go for at least 8 to 12 weeks now. Because if one person undetected starts spreading it again, then it becomes wild in the community, and it's no longer important. And then you do have to work from home and shut everything down.
Yeah, absolutely. So just on the shutdowns and the laws and rules that have been put in place, I guess there's been discussion recently around rights, civil liberties, and all that sort of thing. Not so much. More like in the sense of they're worried about where it's going as opposed to exactly what's happening right here and right now, and whether or not that these things can be rolled back, how easily they could be put in place. A lot of what I've read is more along the lines of they might not scale back everything 100%, and keep a few things in place that are a bit more draconian, perhaps, that a lot of the civil libertarians probably wouldn't like.
Well, it's a funny thing. I mean, I think has been shown up here is how dumb regulations can be. So you set a distance of 1.5 because if you want to regulate, you have to have a measure. So no more than one person for every 4 square metres indoors, 1.5 distance between, no more than 2 items at the supermarket, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to have some sort of measure or metric so you can enforce a regulation. But the reality is that then these overzealous sort of people say, well, 1.5 metres, that means that if you're at 1.4, I can give you a fine. And that's just stupid. That doesn't do anything to educate the community. It doesn't do anything to encourage the community to do a better job of being aware of the danger of contracting corona, or being aware that as a potential carrier there could be trouble that that comes through that. So you have to, I've got no issue with the police going around and cautioning people, saying you're a little bit close, or did you know about the dangers? But to start fining people, that just doesn't solve anything, and if anything, it just sows the seeds of rebellion.
Oh, well, there's the dystopian future right there, isn't it? Sliding into it. I guess just to slowly sort of wrap it up in this context is the idea of is it going to be the same after all this? So there's a lot of discussion around that too, because there was some commentary around the government announcing all these stimulus packages and putting all these things in place, with the idea though being that they can just snap it back when they need to, so that the economy can just go back to what it was before. But I don't know if that's necessarily taking into account that this could potentially change the way a lot of the economy works as well, and how people do their business, how they go out and about and do things. Maybe they don't have to go out, like you've said before, like does everyone need to go into an office to work? That sort of stuff.
A toll road to get us to the office we don't need to go to.
Yeah, exactly. So it would seem to me that further to what we were saying, I think last week, that it's like a breaking of a habit and forming new ones, that potentially there could be new behaviours that come out of it as well.
Oh, I think there's no question of that. And, it's everything from how we work to, some of the financial structures people have got, investment properties, the way we move around, the type of business, the value of real estate, to the way the government delivers policy and regulation. But I think the biggest thing for me that is truly incredible is this is the first time in our lifetime we've seen governments in Western democracies take control like this. And that means that once it's been done, the precedent is set, and this could happen again. So there's a good chance we might have COVID-20 next year and have to do this all again, or, sometime in the future. And I don't think there'll be a hesitation next time. People, it could become the norm, maybe every autumn or winter, everything shuts for 3 months to stop the spread of flu, COVID, and anything else. I mean, this is quite incredible. And that would mean that then the way that you run business, whether it's an airline, whether it's a travel business, whether it's a cruise ship, or whether it's a bar, has to change. So who knows what this will do. But the one thing I'm reasonably certain of, I'm not quite sure it'll just snap back to how it was.
Yeah, and that'll be something we'll learn in the coming months. Particularly the leaders might need to sort of see and learn that as well, because I'm sure that, I guess, maybe they're like the rest of us and just sort of dealing with it for the first time and the realities of it all.
That's right.
I guess just on a final frivolous note, I guess, you've got a lot of people, now stuck at home and posting stuff on social media about what they're doing in their bedroom and stuff. I just want to, go on the record here and say we've been doing this for like almost 10 years now, haven't we?
That's right.
It's like everyone's copying us now. There are some interesting things, like, there was a nice piece that I think it's the Aussie Pops Orchestra did, where they're getting everyone to play their instruments in their home and then they combine it together. But then you get the random, I don't know, I guess this is what I'm having for breakfast in my home today type stuff, which is just crazy. And it just, the social media aspect is really rather funny in that respect.
Well, I think this is changing the way we use social media once again. And I think it's also changing the way I think we interact with each other. And I think probably to a large extent that's going to be positive. I certainly hope so. The work from home thing and the social thing are now becoming one and the same. So we're working, we're checking in with colleagues, but checking in with colleagues is not just to get information for work. It's also just to check in and say hi and a little bit of social interaction, which is nice. And, these are the things that I hope, people have always spoken about social media, ending isolation of people who are housebound or lonely. And maybe this is the initial steps for that. Let's hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll wrap it up there. So don't forget to check out our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. Subscribe to our YouTube, Vimeo channels and our RSS feeds, and listen to us on any of your devices or watch us. And we greatly appreciate your visit to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.